Hello, Annalicia. We're gonna talk a little bit about your 5 characteristics posting. Just sort of go through what we see, give you a little bit of feedback, and talk a little bit about your image making. So we'll go ahead and share screens here, and we'll get going. Move ourselves over here. And let's start going through them. So the first thing that I like to do is just sort of do a rundown of what I see, the kind of organization of the posting, whether it seems to make logical sense, whether it's easy to navigate, and so on. So as I'm looking through this, I see we start off with temperature, which is the third of the 5. So that would have been maybe posted in terms of the list of the order that they would be seen, probably number 3, as you might have discovered when you were seeing some of the other postings from the other students. Direction would have come first, and then intensity, and then temperature, and then contrast, and then hardness, just in terms of the organization of the presentation, so that when you're looking at them, it's easy to navigate. It really is all about being able to work through all of them. So temperature would have been later on. I do like, however, how you're giving us some information here. This is kind of nice. Now, other students didn't quite do this yet, at least the ones that I've been reviewing so far. You're not only telling us that it is the temperature, you're also giving us the coordinates on the wheel. That is a nice sort of addition to what you're doing. So temperature, you have this here. We'll go back and talk a little bit more individually about them. And then we get into contrast, and then intensity. So we're out of order. It looks like you've got them posted here. They're just sort of not in the logical order that they're in. I'm not going to ding people so much on stuff like this at first. A lot of mercy on this first project, because we're still sort of learning what the expectations are, kind of figuring out what, how to navigate the blog and that kind of thing. So when I point these things out, I don't want you to feel like, oh my gosh, I did something totally wrong, I'm going to fail the project or anything like that. I just want to make sure that you understand the sort of what the expectation is in terms of organizing things and stuff. And when you have questions, all you have to do is ask, and then we'll straighten it out. This would be easy to correct anyway. You could go into your own posting and reorganize the images, which you could do at any time. But it does look like you have everything. They're just sort of in a random order there. So let's go ahead and go through and just take a look at what we have. It does also look like you've identified them correctly, meaning that the images that are in color are used in temperature. I am looking at these, and it looks like you're using more bottles, which is fine. You can use as many bottles as are available to you when you're working here. In some cases, it does appear that you're getting in there and using the entire picture plane. What I mean is, in an image like this, where from edge to edge, when you have the edge of the frame here, all the way to the other edge of the frame here, up to the top and down to the bottom, everything seems to be utilized in the composition, where it seems like you're looking at all of that stuff. That's what I mean about a dynamic composition, where you're taking advantage of the whole picture plane. We like to see that in all of your imagery, where you're not sort of disregarding any part of it. There are some cases where it seems a little bit like, well, you maybe weren't looking at that. Like, for instance, here, this background part, it's not really participating with the rest of the photograph. Really, what you were looking at probably, what you were looking at probably was, let's come back to it. What you were looking at probably was this area right here, in the image. And then this background, especially because it's got the sort of ruffles in the back, you got this sort of corner edge, it just isn't contributing to the rest of the composition. So as you're making photography, you have to understand that, that everything in your frame is part of the image. Unlike something like drawing, where if you were to be looking at this and you were going to be doing a drawing of it, and you were interested in the interaction of those bottles right there, you would just be drawing those areas, right? You would just have your drawing and you would start to draw those areas of the bottles. And if you didn't want the background cloth to be addressed or in your image, you wouldn't draw it. Well, in photography, in order to not have something there, you have to crop it out. You have to not include it in your frame. It's an active choice. So that's just something that you learn very quickly when you start to be critical about your photographic images. This isn't a composition class, but we do want you to apply all of the compositional skills that you're learning in your other coursework, like two-dimensional design, your drawing classes, and so on. You want to pay attention to those things. So you'll very quickly start to identify things like these ruffled areas that aren't contributing. An image like this is a much better solution because you're not including distracting elements. Here, by rising up and kind of looking down at the angle, you're getting rid of that distracting background. And it, again, uses the entire plane a little bit better. You've got shadow areas here, things are running off the edge. It's just a much more effective use of the entire plane. You're exploring color fairly well here. This is really all about getting to know some of the tools and resources. Now, overall, most students, when they start to do the temperature element, the compositions do start to sort of wane a little bit. They're not quite as strong sometimes because you are thinking about other things. You're thinking about the camera a little bit because there's controls that you're operating, or the lighting, you're operating the temperature of the lighting. So it is usually, I do see on this project where students, if they are going to struggle with the compositions, it's usually on the temperature one because they're thinking of some other things and maybe the composition isn't first in their mind. The contrast, I mean, some of these are really nice. I really appreciate what you're doing with the perspective. We don't see this a whole lot from the other students where you're getting up above. What this does is it allows you to take advantage of some of these really interesting shadow shapes that you're doing. Very good. This is excellent. Photography is as much about the shadows as it is about the highlights, as it is about the objects. So use of shadows really does improve and make your photography all that much more rich, all that much more layered. It shows that you're paying attention to certain elements that are important to photography. So excellent use of the space. Again, with some of these others where you're breaking up the space, this is really, really great stuff here. Really good stuff. Excuse me. Contrast, again, very nice that you're putting in the positions. I do appreciate that. That's excellent. Your use of the supplemental key light, your supplement to the key light using the fill is working quite well to sort of balance out the shadow areas and blend it quite well. This is just really great stuff here. It's showing me that you're paying very close attention to certain things. We could have cropped a little bit closer to this edge, and this is just really maybe a super sort of little, like, it sounds nitpicky, but little areas like this that I call little like crashes, where it sort of pinches right there. If it would have been cropped off a little bit farther, where this sort of triangle would have been a little bit eased a little bit more, would have given you a little bit better. Notice how over here, because it doesn't pinch quite as much, that it feels much more natural feeling. However, the use of these shadows is fantastic. Just really, really good stuff doing it like this. Now, over here, you're using this space because you've organized it in such a way, it is an effective use of that background, unlike what happened with the temperature element where it just didn't feel like it was incorporated into the composition as well as it is being incorporated into this composition. So moving into direction, which is the first one, usually what we see is the direction one. That's where the compositions tend to be the most accomplished, because it's all you have to think about is the direction of the light and the organization of the bottles. And I think you're doing some pretty good compositions here, but clearly intensity and contrast, it seems like you hit your stride there. You were starting to really see the bottles as objects to manipulate light rather than just objects to photograph. And in this case, you have some really effective stuff, but I think when it comes to the sort of overall strategy, that you found your voice somewhere around intensity and then kind of took off from there in some of them. That said, this sort of indicates a little bit more about your compositional style would begin to look like. Gets a little bit dark on the edges, but this sort of use of the shadows and the use of shape is a very good indication of what it is that that you're all about in terms of composition. The repetition of shape going through there. This is a very good way of seeing, and I would encourage you to continue with that vision. Hardness, again, we're introducing the element of diffusion on the light, softening the shadows or maintaining a crisp shadow. You're paying attention to the shadows because this is what it's all about. And in a case like this, you're using the two lights and you're using them to great effect. It's a very graphic sort of sense to some of your photography. And what I mean is, a graphic designer would appreciate the kind of images that you're making because they lend themselves to the addition of other elements like type and text and stuff like that. So that's what I mean by there's sort of a graphic nature to some of the photography that you're doing. It's quite good. So overall, I would say that your compositions are very strong. You have definitely a unique voice. You explored the various characteristics fairly well. You had a few hiccups there just in terms of some of the compositions weren't quite hitting there. You were either red hot or they just didn't work, which is fine. I mean, that's going to happen in the first few projects until you find a way that your photography suits you. The order of the characteristics is a little off, but that's not such a big deal since you have them all there anyway. It's just a note that to kind of organize them in a way that's easy for us to identify. That said, I do really appreciate that you're identifying where the position of the light is, particularly because it's going to help you later on to identify where certain lights are to replicate what it is that you're doing. Because when you find a solution that you're really excited about, you'll want to be able to do it again. So that's really important. So that's what I have for you. You will have a grade form. I have grade forms that I fill out for you and that you'll get. You'll be pleased with the grade that you did because you did an excellent job overall. There are always improvements. There's always things that you could do to do a little bit better, but I don't think there was anything super pressing that would indicate that you would have to do a bunch of things over, other than maybe a couple of things that I had mentioned to sort of clean up the way the posting looks. Beyond that, very nice work. I look forward to seeing your photography in the future. So we'll see you in the studio. Bye-bye now.